I was 22 and pregnant when Blake walked into my life, and honestly, it felt like the universe was finally giving me a break. Marcus had just walked out on me 3 months earlier when he found out about my little mistake with his roommate, which, by the way, wasn't even that serious, just a stupid drunken kiss that somehow turned into something more. And there I was, alone and showing, wondering how the hell I was going to raise a baby by myself. But then Blake showed up at the coffee shop where I was working, all sweet and charming with his stupid dimpled smile, and when he asked me out, I figured why not? I deserved some happiness after everything I'd been through. The thing is, Blake didn't even flinch when I told him I was pregnant. Most guys would have run for the hills, but not him. He actually seemed excited about it, talking about how he'd always wanted to be a dad, and how timing didn't matter when you met the right person. It was almost too good to be true, which is probably why I decided to keep certain details to myself. When he asked about Tyler's father, I just told him the guy couldn't handle the responsibility and walked away. Which was basically true, right? Marcus did leave me when things got complicated, so really, I was just protecting Tyler from getting hurt by someone who'd already proved he was unreliable. Blake ate it up, of course. He loved playing the hero, stepping in to save me and my unborn baby from the big bad deadbeat dad. And honestly, it worked out perfectly for everyone involved. Tyler got a father who actually wanted him. I got a partner who wasn't going to bail the second things got tough, and Blake got to feel like some kind of saint for taking on another man's responsibility. Win-win-win, as far as I could see. By the time Tyler turned 2, Blake had legally adopted him, and we were this perfect little family unit. Blake would carry Tyler around on his shoulders, teaching him to throw a baseball and reading him bedtime stories, and Tyler would call him Daddy, like he'd been doing it his whole life. When people asked about Tyler's real father, I'd just shake my head sadly and say something about how some men just aren't cut out for parenthood, and Blake would squeeze my hand supportively. It was beautiful, really. We were giving Tyler something better than what his biological father ever could have provided. When Yolanda was born 3 years later, and then Chase 2 years after that, our family felt complete. Tyler was such a good big brother, helping with diaper changes and making the babies laugh, and Blake treated all 3 kids exactly the same. No favoritism, no awkward distinctions between biological and adopted, just one big happy family. I'd watch Blake teaching Tyler to ride a bike or helping him with homework, and I'd think about how much better this was than whatever sad situation Marcus would have provided. Tyler had stability, love, a real father figure who showed up every single day. What more could a kid ask for? The first real test came when Tyler was 12 and started having these weird health episodes. Fainting spells, chest pains, stuff that had the doctors all concerned and asking a million questions about family medical history. Blake was amazing through the whole thing, holding Tyler's hand during tests and staying up all night when Tyler was scared about what might be wrong with him. But the doctors kept pushing for information about Tyler's biological father's medical background, and I could see Tyler getting more and more upset every time they brought it up. "Why can't we just call him?" Tyler asked one night after a particularly rough day at the hospital. "I mean, if it might help figure out what's wrong with me, wouldn't he want to know?" Blake looked at me across Tyler's hospital bed, and I could see the question in his eyes, too. But what was I supposed to say? That I'd been lying for 12 years? That Marcus didn't even know Tyler existed? That would destroy everything we'd built, everything good and stable in Tyler's life, just to get some medical information that the doctors could probably figure out on their own anyway. "I tried reaching out to your biological father for medical information," I told Tyler, squeezing his hand, "but he refused to help. I'm so sorry, baby." The look of hurt that crossed Tyler's face almost broke my heart, but Blake immediately jumped in to comfort him. "Hey, buddy, that just proves what we already knew. That guy doesn't deserve to be called your father. We'll figure this out without him, okay? You've got me, and I'm not going anywhere." Tyler nodded and hugged Blake tight, and I felt this surge of pride in how perfectly my husband handled the situation. This was exactly why I'd made the choices I made. Marcus would have probably just caused more stress and confusion anyway, and here was Blake, being the father Tyler actually needed. The doctors eventually figured out Tyler's condition, some minor heart rhythm thing that was manageable with medication, and life went back to normal. Tyler seemed to put the whole biological father thing behind him, focusing on high school and friends and all the regular teenage stuff. Blake coached his baseball team. I went to every game. Yolanda and Chase cheered from the stands. We were living the American dream, as far as I was concerned. Everything was fine until Tyler's 18th birthday party, when my sister Linda decided to stick her nose where it didn't belong. I was in the kitchen cleaning up cake plates when I noticed her pulling Tyler aside on the back porch, talking to him in this serious, hushed tone that immediately put me on edge. Linda had always been jealous of how well my life turned out. She was still single, still bouncing between dead-end jobs while I had this beautiful family and stable marriage, but I never thought she'd actually try to sabotage things. I couldn't hear exactly what she was saying, but I caught enough words to know she was filling Tyler's head with garbage about looking for answers and how things might not be like they seemed. When I confronted her about it later, she just gave me this innocent look and claimed she was just encouraging Tyler to be curious about his roots. "He's 18 now, Savannah," she said. "He has a right to know the truth." "He knows the truth," I snapped back. His father didn't want him, and Blake stepped up. That's the truth that matters. But I could see something had shifted in Tyler after that conversation. He started asking more questions about his biological father, wanting to know details I'd never bothered to keep straight. What did he look like? Where was he from? Did he have other family? I tried to deflect, to remind Tyler how lucky he was to have Blake, but I could tell Linda's little seed of doubt had taken root. Still, I wasn't too worried. It had been almost 20 years, and it wasn't like Marcus was out there actively looking for kids he didn't know about. Even if Tyler did some digging, what would he find? And honestly, maybe it would be good for him to hit a dead end and realize once and for all that Blake was his real family. So when Tyler mentioned wanting to do one of those DNA test things during his freshman year of college, I didn't try to talk him out of it. Blake raised an eyebrow when Tyler brought it up over dinner, but I just shrugged and said, if it would give Tyler some closure, why not? What was the worst that could happen? Apparently, a lot worse than I'd imagined. Tyler called me on a Thursday evening in March, and I could tell immediately that something was different in his voice. Not upset exactly, but excited in a way that made my stomach clench. "Mom, I need to talk to you and Blake," he said. "Can I come over this weekend? There's something important I need to discuss with you guys." "Of course, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, actually, everything's great. Better than great. I'll explain when I get there." I spent the next 3 days trying not to think about that phone call. But something about Tyler's tone kept nagging at me. When he showed up Saturday morning with this manila folder clutched in his hands and this weird, intense look on his face, I knew my instincts had been right to worry. Blake was making his famous pancakes. Well, famous in our house anyway, though he always used way too much vanilla extract when Tyler sat down at the kitchen table and opened his folder. Yolanda was complaining about some chemistry test, and Chase was doing that annoying thing where he chews with his mouth open, but Tyler seemed completely focused on whatever papers he had spread out in front of him. "So," Tyler said, looking back and forth between Blake and me, "I got some interesting results from that DNA test." My heart started beating faster, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh yeah? Find out you're part Irish or something?" Tyler shook his head, and that's when he dropped the bomb that would change everything. "I found my biological father," he said. "His name is Marcus, and he lives about 2 hours from here. I met him yesterday." The spatula slipped out of Blake's hand and clattered to the floor. Yolanda stopped complaining about chemistry. Even Chase looked up from his phone. "That's impossible," I said automatically. "Tyler, honey, whoever you met is lying to you. Your biological father made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with you." But Tyler was shaking his head again, pulling out photos and documents from his folder. "No, Mom, that's not true." Marcus never knew I existed. He matched with his sister on the DNA site, and when she told him about me, he was shocked. He said if he'd known about me, he would have been there from the beginning. I felt like the room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not after everything we'd built. They're lying, I said, my voice getting louder. Tyler, think about this logically. Why would they lie about something like this? What do they have to gain? Mom, he had medical information, Tyler said quietly. All the stuff the doctors needed when I was 12. He brought copies of his family's medical history, offered to be tested as a donor if I ever needed it. He apologized for not being there, for not knowing. Blake was staring at me now, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. Savannah, he said slowly, what is Tyler talking about? I don't know, I said, throwing my hands up. Some stranger is filling our son's head with lies, and you're just going to believe it? But Tyler wasn't done. He pulled out more papers, what looked like official documents and family photos. Marcus showed me pictures of when you two were together, Tyler said. He said you broke up because you cheated on him with his roommate, and he never knew you were pregnant when he left. The kitchen went completely silent except for the sound of pancakes burning on the stove. Blake slowly turned off the burner, his movements mechanical and careful. Savannah, Blake said again, and this time there was something different in his voice. Something cold. Is that true? I looked around the table at my family, my husband, my son, my other kids, and realized that everything I'd worked so hard to build was crumbling right in front of me. But I wasn't going down without a fight. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. Yes, Marcus and I broke up because I made a mistake. But everything else I told you was true. He left me when I needed him most, and he never tried to contact me after that. Never tried to find out if I was okay, if the baby was okay, nothing. Because he didn't know there was a baby. Tyler said, his voice rising. Mom, he showed me the timeline. You found out you were pregnant after he'd already moved out. You never told him. Blake was looking at me like he'd never seen me before. Savannah, is that true? Did you never tell Marcus about Tyler? I could feel everything slipping away, but I had to make them understand. I was protecting our family, I said. Tyler, you have to understand, I met Blake when you were just a baby, and he loved you immediately. He wanted to be your father. Why would I mess that up by bringing Marcus back into the picture? Because Tyler had a right to know his biological father, Blake said, and his voice was getting louder now too. Because when he was sick and needed medical information, you lied to all of us. You made me complicit in keeping them apart. I was protecting him. I shouted back. Marcus walked away once. What if he did it again? What if he disappointed Tyler? I gave Tyler something better. You gave Tyler a lie, Blake said, standing up from the table. You made me comfort him about his father's rejection when there was no rejection. You let him believe his biological father didn't want him when that was never true. Tyler was crying now, and Yolanda and Chase were staring at all of us like we'd lost our minds. Which maybe we had. I don't understand what's happening, Yolanda said in a small voice. Why is everyone yelling? Blake knelt down next to her chair. Your mom made some choices a long time ago that weren't fair to Tyler or his biological father. But this isn't Tyler's fault, okay? He was just trying to get answers about his health. So our family is broken because Tyler couldn't leave well enough alone? Chase asked, and I wanted to hug him for finally saying what I'd been thinking. Your family is broken because I lied, I said, the words coming out harsher than I intended. I met Blake after Marcus left me, and I came up with a story so we could be a normal family. I never contacted Marcus because I wanted to keep things as they were. Blake stared at me for a long moment, and I could see our entire marriage flashing through his eyes. You put your lies above Tyler's health, he said quietly. When he was 12 and scared and sick, you chose protecting your secret over getting him the help he needed. The doctors figured it out anyway, I protested. Tyler's fine. Everything worked out. That's not the point, Savannah, Blake said, and he was moving around the kitchen now, pacing like a caged animal. The point is that you made that choice. You decided your comfort was more important than Tyler's well-being, more important than honesty, more important than giving Marcus a chance to know his son. I wanted to argue, to make him see that I'd been protecting all of us. but Tyler spoke up before I could. "Blake's right," Tyler said, wiping his eyes. "Mom," Marcus cried when he met me. He said losing 19 years with me was the worst thing he could imagine. He brought baby clothes he'd been saving, just in case he ever had kids. He's been wanting to be a father his whole life. That hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Tyler, honey, Blake has been your father. He's the one who raised you, who was there for every important moment." "And I love Blake," Tyler said, looking at his adoptive father with genuine affection. "But that doesn't mean I didn't have a right to know Marcus too. And Marcus had a right to know me." Blake sat back down heavily, running his hands through his hair. "I need some time to think about this," he said. "Savannah, I can't even look at you right now." "Blake, please," I started, but he held up his hand. 19 years, he said. 19 years you've been lying to me, to Tyler, to everyone, making me complicit in keeping a father and son apart. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" Yolanda started crying then, and Chase got up from the table and stomped upstairs. The perfect family breakfast I'd been imagining an hour earlier was completely destroyed, and everyone was acting like I was the villain when all I'd ever done was try to protect the people I loved. Blake packed a suitcase that night and went to stay with his brother. He said he needed space to process everything, to figure out what this meant for our marriage. I tried to explain that this had all happened before we even had Yolanda and Chase, that it didn't change anything about our family now, but he wouldn't listen. "It changes everything, Savannah," he said, throwing clothes into his bag. "It changes how I see you, how I see our entire relationship. You built our marriage on a lie." "I built our marriage on love," I protested. "Blake, you know how much I love you, how much our family means to me." He stopped packing and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have made me an accessory to your deception. If you loved Tyler, you wouldn't have stolen 19 years from him and Marcus." After Blake left, Yolanda and Chase barely spoke to me for days. They were confused and angry, and instead of being mad at Tyler for turning our lives upside down, they seemed to be buying into this narrative that I was somehow the bad guy in all this. "Why did you lie, Mom?" Yolanda asked me one night when I was tucking her into bed. "If Tyler's dad wanted to know him, why didn't you let him?" How was I supposed to explain to a 16-year-old that sometimes adults have to make complicated choices to protect their families? That sometimes a small lie prevents a lot of bigger pain? "I thought I was doing the right thing at the time," I told her. "I wanted to give Tyler the best life possible. But now Dad's gone and Tyler won't talk to us, and everything's ruined," she said, starting to cry again. That's when it really hit me how unfair this whole situation was. Tyler was out there playing happy family with Marcus and his relatives, posting pictures on social media like they'd known each other forever, while the rest of us were dealing with the fallout from his need to dig up the past. Blake was being completely dramatic about the whole thing, acting like I'd committed some unforgivable sin instead of just trying to protect our family's stability. The divorce papers came 3 weeks later. Blake had apparently been talking to a lawyer, claiming irreconcilable differences and asking for joint custody of Yolanda and Chase. When I called him, he was cold and businesslike, nothing like the man who'd been making me pancakes and telling me he loved me just a month earlier. "We can work through this," I told him. "Blake, think about our children. Think about everything we've built together." "I am thinking about our children," he said. "I'm thinking about how you taught them that lying is acceptable if it serves your purposes. I'm thinking about how you prioritized your comfort over Tyler's right to know his father. Tyler had a father." I shouted into the phone. You were his father in every way that mattered." "And I always will be," Blake said quietly. "But that doesn't excuse what you did, Savannah. I can't trust you anymore. I can't be married to someone who could lie so easily for so long about something so important." The worst part was how Yolanda and Chase reacted to the divorce news. Instead of being angry at Tyler for causing all this chaos, they seemed to accept Blake's explanation that it wasn't Tyler's fault, that he'd just been trying to get medical information he needed. They started blaming me for not handling things differently, for not being honest from the beginning. If you just told the truth, maybe we could have all been one big family. Chase said one day when I was trying to explain why Blake had moved out permanently. Tyler could have had 2 dads, and we could have had more aunts and uncles and stuff. But that's not how real life works. You can't just blend families together like ingredients in a recipe and expect everything to turn out perfectly. I'd seen what happened when Marcus was in my life before. Drama, chaos, heartbreak. I'd given Tyler something better, something stable, and now everyone was acting like that was somehow wrong. Tyler finally agreed to meet with me about 6 months after everything exploded, but it wasn't the reunion I'd been hoping for. He was different, more confident, happier in a way that honestly hurt to see. He talked about Marcus like they'd been close for years, about medical treatments he was getting based on the family history Marcus had provided, about half-siblings he'd never known existed. The doctor said Marcus's medical information was incredibly helpful. Tyler told me over coffee. They were able to adjust my medication and catch some potential issues early. If we'd had this information when I was 12. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. I was supposed to feel guilty about prioritizing our family's stability over medical information that the doctors had eventually figured out anyway. "I'm glad you're healthy," I said carefully, "and I'm glad you got the answers you were looking for. But Tyler, you have to understand that I was trying to protect you. Marcus left me when I was pregnant and vulnerable. I couldn't risk him doing the same thing to you." Tyler shook his head. "Mom, he didn't leave you when you were pregnant. He left you when he found out you cheated on him, before he even knew about me. There's a difference." "The result was the same," I pointed out. "He was gone when you needed him most." "Because he didn't know I existed," Tyler said, his voice getting frustrated. "Mom, can't you see how different this would have been if you'd just told him the truth from the beginning?" "But that's the thing. I did see. I saw exactly how different it would have been. And none of those differences would have been good. Marcus would have wanted custody arrangements, would have confused Tyler with conflicting parenting styles, would have probably brought his own drama and complications into our lives. Blake might never have felt comfortable fully adopting Tyler. Might have always seen him as someone else's responsibility. Our family would have been fractured and complicated instead of stable and whole. Now, 2 years later, I'm living in the house Blake and I bought together, but I'm living in it alone most of the time. Yolanda and Chase split their time between my place and Blake's apartment, and they're always talking about their weekends with Dad, their new stepmom Sarah, their half-brother Tyler, who comes to visit with his girlfriend and brings presents from Marcus's side of the family. Blake remarried last spring. Sarah's a kindergarten teacher, all sweet and nurturing and completely different from me. Yolanda and Chase love her, of course, because she bakes cookies and does craft projects and never has to make hard choices about protecting her family from complicated truths. Tyler sends me a card on Mother's Day and my birthday. But we don't really have a relationship anymore. He's too busy with his new expanded family, his biological father who takes him fishing and teaches him to fix cars, his half-siblings who think he's the coolest big brother ever. I see pictures on social media sometimes. Tyler and Marcus at baseball games, Tyler and his girlfriend having dinner with Marcus's parents, Tyler being a groomsman in Marcus's wedding to some woman who gets to play stepmother to my son. Everyone acts like this is some beautiful, happy ending. Like truth and honesty won the day, and now everyone's better off. But what about me? What about the 19 years I spent building a family, raising Tyler, making a home with Blake? What about the fact that I gave Tyler a stable, loving childhood, with a father who was actually present and committed? Yolanda and Chase still barely speak to Tyler when he comes around, which is the only thing that gives me any satisfaction in this whole mess. They understand what I understand, that Tyler's need for truth destroyed our family. If he'd just left well enough alone, if he'd just been grateful for the father who actually raised him, we'd all still be together. Tyler ruined everything, Chase said to me last week when Blake picked him up for his weekend visit. We were happy before he decided to play detective. And that's the thing everyone seems to forget. We were happy. We were a real family, with real love and real commitment. Blake was more of a father to Tyler than Marcus ever could have been, because Blake chose to be there every single day. But apparently that doesn't matter anymore. Apparently the only thing that matters is biological connections and absolute honesty, even when that honesty destroys everything good you've built. I know what people think about me now. I know Blake tells his friends and his new wife that I'm some kind of manipulative liar who kept a father and son apart for selfish reasons. I know Tyler probably tells Marcus all sorts of stories about how awful I was, how I damaged him by not giving him access to his real family. I know Yolanda and Chase hear these narratives and wonder if their mother is really the villain everyone makes me out to be. But what they don't understand, what none of them understand, is that every choice I made was about protecting the people I love. I gave Tyler a better father than Marcus would have been. I gave Blake a son who needed him. I created a family that worked, that was stable and loving and whole. The fact that it was built on what everyone calls a lie doesn't change the fact that it was real, that it was good, that it was better than whatever messy, complicated situation would have existed if I'd told the truth from the beginning. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Linda had kept her mouth shut, if Tyler had never gotten curious about his biological father, if that DNA test had never connected him with Marcus's family. We'd still be together. Blake and I would still be married, Tyler would still call Blake his dad, Yolanda and Chase would still have their intact family. Everyone would be happier, even if they don't want to admit it now. But instead, everyone chose to prioritize some abstract notion of truth over the concrete reality of the family we'd built together. And now, look where we are. Scattered, broken, pretending that these new configurations are somehow better than what we had before. I'm not sorry for the choices I made 20 years ago. I'm sorry that everyone else couldn't see the value in what those choices created. I'm sorry that Tyler couldn't just be grateful for the father who raised him. I'm sorry that Blake couldn't forgive one lie that was told to protect our family's happiness. But I'm not sorry for giving Tyler the best childhood I could, for giving Blake the chance to be the father he always wanted to be, for creating something beautiful and stable out of what could have been a disaster. That's what good mothers do. They make the hard choices. They protect their families. They sacrifice their own comfort for their children's well-being. Even if no one else will ever understand that.